We begin in Niger, where a group of military officers has announced a coup on national television. They said they've dissolved the constitution in the West African country, suspended all institutions and closed the country's borders.
The Republic of Kenya joins the rest of the world to condemn in the strongest terms this unconstitutional act that subverts democracy through a coup d'etat.
The political crisis in Niger is deepening as France now is evacuating its citizens from the capital. And the effects are being felt well beyond the West African nation's borders. The international community are now taking entrenched positions, trading threats of intervention, sanctions and even war.
Such measures may include the use of force.
The U.S. government has not officially called this a coup. If they did, they'd have to suspend more than $400 million in aid to Niger, as well as critical military cooperation to battle terror groups in West Africa.
We are very closely monitoring the situation and developments in Niger. I spoke with President Bazoum earlier this morning and made clear that the United States resolutely supports him as the democratically elected president of Niger. We call for his immediate release. We condemn any effort to seize power by force.
If there is an event in Africa today that epitomizes anti-colonial rhetoric, it is the recent coup in Niger. And as things stand today, Africa is facing the possibility of a full-blown war at its doorstep. The new military junta is digging in. ECOWAS is making threats.
Avertissent que toute intervention militaire
warn that any military intervention against Niger would amount to a declaration of war against Burkina Faso and Mali.
Niger is part of the restless backyard known as the Sahel region of West Africa. This was the only country in the region without a military ruler. And General Abdulrahman Tiani is now the man in charge, formerly of the Presidential Guard. And when the coup happened, he was installed as the new president. The coup has now been backed by Niger's immediate neighbors, Burkina Faso and Mali, also being led by military juntas. And it's worth noting that the military juntas are headed by very young fellows. It does say something that the young and restless of Africa are growing sick and tired of the grand old men of African politics, the Paul Bias of this world who could barely walk at the recent Russia-Africa summit, had to be shown his way. Paul Biya spends most of his time living in Switzerland at an hotel at the expense of taxpayers' money.
Monsieur le Président de la Fédération de Russie,
Your Excellency, President of the Russian Federation.
And those are the kind of leaders that the youth of Africa is saying they want swept out of office. The entire Sahel region, from the Atlantic, is now under military rule. So what really is the trouble with Niger and the Sahel region? Is the ECOWAS threat to intervene militarily and sanctions really going to make things any better within the Sahel region? Let's find out. In the meantime, if you're new here, remember to subscribe and hit that like button so that you do not miss any of our upcoming stories.
The government and the people of Kenya earnestly urge all parties involved to refrain from further escalation that might jeopardize the lives and livelihoods of the people of Niger.
President Ruto and ECOWAS were among the first to condemn that coup. And perhaps they spoke too fast, too soon. Really, they should have bid their time to understand what exactly was going on. That coup has now been backed by Niger's immediate neighbors, Mali and Burkina Faso. So why was a democratically elected president, Mohamed Bazoum, deposed in Niger? Analysts suggest that Bazoum's biggest mistake was to align with the Western powers. Niger has a total of 4 American and French military bases within its territories, apparently fighting terrorism. The Sahel region has been reduced to a theater of warfare and senseless killing of civilians, where the continued presence of Western troops is really to protect their own security and commercial interests within the West African region. And who pays the ultimate price? The locals, the citizens. So you can understand why Nigerians celebrated the coup. Niger is one of the poorest countries in the world today, despite having vital minerals such as uranium, which France has mined for decades to support its electricity supply. And France makes over $3 billion selling the same power that they get from uranium to other countries within the region. But what does Niger get in return? The country is that poor. It is little wonder then that these problems invited the coup that happened. The presidential guard, who apparently was fired, and the military took advantage of this reality on the ground. And indeed, the feeling in the streets was that Niger is now taking charge of its own affairs.
We have uranium, we have diamonds, we have gold, we have oil, and we live like slaves. Why should we? Until when? We can't accept it. The French base in Niger must leave. We don't need the French to keep us safe.
The world must understand that Africa's misfortune is France, the authorities, because the French are citizens like us, so we can't hate them. But we hate their authorities because they've done too much harm to our country, and really, enough is enough.
President Mobutu and I have had the opportunity to review and renew one of our oldest and most solid friendships in Africa, that between the United States and the Republic of Zaire.
So, while many African leaders work in cahoots with the Western states, the center powers of the world, the elites of Africa are the ones who benefit directly. And young African leaders are saying today that it cannot be business as usual, that our countries stay in abject poverty. We've got so much resources within our soils, we've got so much resources in terms of human capital. Yet our leaders run to the West to beg for arms, to beg for aid, as though Africa is impoverished. Africa is only impoverished because of the poor leadership that it gets.
It's not quite clear to me how come that Africa that has so many resources, water, solar energy, how come that currently it is the poorest continent in the world with the highest levels of famine? How come that we have to ask for help? We ask ourselves, but we don't get any answers. I would like to convey a message to the heads of African states.
Nous devons prendre l'expérience de ceux qui ont pu déjà atteindre cela en Afrique, tisser de bonnes relations ici, et tisser de meilleures relations avec la Fédération de Russie pour pouvoir assouvir les besoins de nos populations.
No wonder then that a lot of people across the world find Africa to be a laughingstock, because there's a sense that African leaders are easy to manipulate. African leaders are quick to get aid, which in real sense does not end up in the pockets of their citizens. This money goes to the pockets of these leaders who are working in cahoots with the Western powers. They know it, they cannot run from it, and it has made the idea of coups as a solution to be the currency that is now within African political systems. Will the coups offer a solution? Will the military juntas offer a solution? There's a big doubt on that, because the minute they taste power, it is difficult to reverse. And there are several extensions of military regimes in many countries. The promise for elections does not eventually work, and Africa sadly is suffering the fate of poor leadership that has invited the military into what really should be political systems run through a democratic process. That democratic process is often manipulated, and elections in Africa today are void of real winners. The court processes in many countries have now become the avenue to rubber stamp what many see as a doubtful process that installs presidents through the back door. But that is a sad reality, and Africa is our business. So it's a fight that African nations and African states and African citizens will have to figure out on their own, again, without the meddling of Western powers. Because indeed, Africa is well endowed to get the nation states to a whole new level of development. That, my brothers and sisters, is our business to sort out. So how does this one end? West Africa's regional body, ECOWAS, has threatened sanctions, even given ultimatums. But the young leaders are not backing down, and they are certainly ready for war from their own posture. They are claiming power of the sovereign to chart their own future by their own terms. To you, I ask, do you think the young military juntas of the region are right to claim the power of the sovereign, to want to control the affairs of their own nations? Do you think Niger is acting right by celebrating this military coup? Share your thoughts. Let's have a debate on this matter, because Africa really must make Africa its business. Africa has got to take care of its own issues. Remember to subscribe and to ring that bell so that you don't miss any of our new episodes. We are certainly fired up about Africa, and Africa is our business. If we don't fix it, we don't expect anybody else to come from outside to make sense of our own affairs. This is definitely Africa, our business. We will see you on the other side. Salute.